Um, what all this says to me is that other countries are marching ahead. What do you think it's the United States and it's clearly being left behind? What we're our jobs? You have many friends, Tony, who are overseas working.
That's correct, I do. Now, one of the things here in the United States that we're starting to build nuclear power plant. Nuclear power plants are starting to come back in the United States.
We have two going on supposedly in Georgia.
That's correct, and there's supposed to be started one in Crystal River nuclear power plant down that area, and there's some more in the works, and we just a lot more red tape that we go through here in the United States to start a nuclear power plant and how to get it started, and it's important to understand that we need reusable energy, and nuclear power is one of the best energies you can have, as far as I'm concerned, and we are striving to go in the right direction. We just need to step it up a notch and try to catch up to like France and stuff and perfect it. And there's hiccups along the way, and we understand that, but it's mostly minor stuff. It's nothing that major.
Yeah, and just to add into what Tony, and of course, Vermont's a perfect example to what's slowed down nuclear power in this country. It's a political opposition and a great public debate.
And of course,
that's had a big effect in this country.
Well, I think it's had a huge effect because I have read, and maybe I'm wrong, you can correct me, that when nuclear power first became the idea in the 50s, that the government wanted to have 1,000 plants in the country.
That's correct.
And that would have, I mean, you just think if 100 plants provide 20% of our electric needs at this juncture, 1,000 plants we would have been selling power.
They were looking at probably smaller plants, but I think the key point there that you've touched on, very important and still important today, is that Congress was enthusiastic about the nuclear power program, and still is, as a replacement for coal, because of their concerns over black lung disease and strip mining and coal mine accidents in the 50s. Global warming, no one was talking about that in the 1950s, but Congress sure knew about black lung and strip mining. So it was replacement for coal, which is still true around the world. China's a perfect example.
Oh yes, bad air pollution.
I wanted to comment that there was a phase in the history of the Sierra Club where they were pro-nuclear. Basically, there was a lot of dam building going on in the West, and they were flooding places like Glen Canyon and so forth. Or, I don't know if you've ever seen that beautiful book, Remember These Things Lost, about Glen Canyon Dam. And the Sierra Club had a policy of atoms, not dams, because the nuclear plant has a small footprint, a nuclear plant doesn't flood a beautiful valley, and so forth. Then they changed that policy. I don't know why, but they did.
Well, my understanding is that George Aiken, our esteemed senator from this state for many, many years, was very much in favor of nuclear for that exact reason, because the dams coming down the Connecticut flooded a lot of great farmland.
Yes.
So.
Well, a lot of renewable resources take up a lot of space, which is something that people don't like to acknowledge. But if you look at the first renewable, which is the large dams, they flood a lot of farmland. And if you go on to talking about wind turbines, well, you're going to have to put them up on ridges, and you're going to have roads to them and so forth. And there's a book, David McCabe from England wrote a book called Sustainable Energy Without the Hot Air, in which he tries to figure out exactly how much land would it take if we decided to go all renewables, and just, you wouldn't be able to do anything else in England.
Yeah, that can seem like a shell game to some people until you look back, at least I think, at the basic science. And if you ask the question, well, how much energy do you get from wind and water and burning and nuclear power, and you look at it on an individual atom or molecule basis, and you give wind and water a value of 1, then burning gives you 1,000, and splitting atoms gives you 1 billion. So the 1,000,000 to 1 difference on a per atom basis between splitting atoms and water and wind down the road translates to less stuff dug out of the ground and a heck of a lot less hardware that you have to build. That's the basis for it. So it's not a shell game. Say, well, nuclear looks pretty good. because it uses less land, there's less mining, and so forth.
Yeah, and if we, I had heard that if we, maybe you know this answer, Tony, if we just got into this country, got into processing, reprocessing and recycling our fuel in this country, we wouldn't have to dig any more uranium for 200 years. So, I mean, something was thrown out like that. What, do you know anything about that, Meredith?
Well, it would certainly be for quite a long time, because we could use the MOX fuel for quite a long time. To not use any more uranium for hundreds of years, I think we would have to go to slightly different kinds of reactors, or the thorium cycle, and so forth.
But uranium is not a scarce.
No, it's not scarce at all, and there's also, you don't have to use straight uranium, you can use uranium-thorium blends, and thorium is very, very abundant, which is why the India is going to thorium reactors. And once again, it sounds very exotic when I talk about, oh, thorium. Well, the first reactor in this country ran on thorium for a while just to test it out, and you know more about that than I do, in the 70s. So it's not, as I say, we are behind in what we're using, but a lot of these things are not really like far-out research projects. They're used in other parts of the world, in India, MOX fuel all over Europe, etc.
And so, but one of the things I was just sitting here, not a scientist and not involved like you people are, and my personality trusts scientists to be the experts and to have the answers. And since the nuclear industry has had no accidents, and no one's been hurt in this area compared to the others, where you hear blow-ups a lot, more than we'd hope to, I trust that, but other people don't. And so these names are not, sound, again, as you said, exotic or scary or whatever. How do we get around that corner? The safety issue has got to be number one.
I think by keeping the lines of communication open and keep on trying to explain things in terms people can understand. For instance, Meredith said thorium. Well, what is that? Well, thorium is a metal, just the way uranium is and gold and so on. You dig it out of the ground. It's not something that, well, some may have come from outer space, but it's
in a Petri dish. Yeah.
No, it's a normal thing, okay? And it has some industrial uses, including coating those little cotton mantles, for instance, in camping lanterns. So it's something we know about and we know how to use. It's a good source of making. But
never having heard that, you think, oh my gosh, what's this?
It's something, well, and that is the problem, that there's a lot of these things in our industrial technology that are not commonly discussed in the public because they're not of everyday concerns until suddenly people hear about a nuclear power plant or something else.
Well, let's go. Tritium has been a big issue. Tony, tritium is, what are its other applications in our lives? That we
If I may, this is an exit sign which I bought over the internet with my credit card, as anybody can do, and it comes this way with a little sheet from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission which says, don't dispose of this in a landfill. And I'll stick with one unit of measure. The water that has leaked from Vermont Yankee had up to 1 million picocuries per liter. This sign contains over 7 trillion picocuries. So there's more tritium in this sign than in all the water that leaked from Vermont Yankee.
And you're holding it in your lap.
It's perfectly safe to do.
Well, now tritium, what kind, why is that not radiating into your body and spreading all over the county?
Because the radiation from tritium is beta, or electrons, which doesn't pass through the glass of the tubes. These tubes in here with a little fluorescent powder are really little fluorescent lights. And the electrons are making the fluorescent powder grow just the way the electrons from the air make normal fluorescent lights grow.
Tony, if you could tell us the different places tritium bounces around our existence that we don't even know about.
Well, like, let's talk about Canada. Canada has a couple nuclear power plants up there, and their release criteria is a lot higher than ours. You know, our criteria is a lot lower, it's set a lot lower.
So they'll
for
just,
tritium.
we allow much less into the environment than they do in Canada.
Absolutely. And they, you know, I believe we have released less than 1 curie so far. And they've, on their report, I got a report here, right? You can get online, and you go to the Tritium Release and Dose Consequences in Canada of 2006, Part 1 of the Tritium Studies Project. And there's really a lot of good information here. You can get a lot out of it. And their release criteria is a lot higher than ours are.
Now-
And we are self-identifying, what we find something. If it's below the limits, we still report it.
Okay.
We report it.
So even if you don't have to report it because it's just so small of an amount, the government doesn't require it, Vermont Yankee reports it.
We self-identify.
Why do you do that?
Well, it's a safety aspect.
Safety aspect.
Safety is
Okay.
#1 rule of Vermont Yankee, and that's our biggest criteria. Safety's got to be our #1 priority on how we run safe, legal, and efficient nuclear power. Like I said, I have over 30 years of experience. I don't have a degree like these ladies and gentlemen over here, but I have what's called OJT, on-the-job training.
Yeah.
And it's something that is really good when you work with hands-on on what happens in the everyday process that we do at Vermont Yankee. The truth fact that this is where we can buy a product right off the street, right off online.
The tritium's really the hottest
Yes.
thing that we've had, we talked about. You say, you called it a beta ray.
Yeah, that's an electron.
Electron, okay, that means even if I got it on my skin, would that be a problem?
No, because of it's electrically charged, it won't go through your skin. It won't go through a piece of paper.
Okay,
So there's different kinds of radioactivity and radioactive rays or emissions and particles. And
but in the public's mind, they're all lumped together,
Well,
and
that's-
that means bad.
well, that's wrong. It's of course more complicated than that. And for each type of radiation, we know the science in depth after 100 years working on it, more than 100 years since Madame Curie. We know the kind of shielding, and we know what the safe amounts are in your body and in the environment. And this has all been tabulated over 50 years ago. And that's the rule book we run by. And for instance, if you're drinking water with the maximum amount of tritium in it, and it exists naturally in the water, so naturally coming down the Connecticut River, there's tritium in there already. And you're drinking the amount that the EPA uses for a standard for drinking water, you're getting 20 times more than that in one day by eating a banana. You know, from the natural radioactive potassium in bananas. So radioactivity is a natural part of our environment. We have evolved to live with it and prosper with it. And of course, too much is bad for you. Too much water is bad for you. Too much fire is bad for you.
Yeah.
But these are all natural substances which we have learned to use safely.
And exist in our environment, we don't even know about it.
Yeah.
No,
Or
at
aware.
one point, there was a woman who was very upset, and she said, "I bet you wouldn't drink any of that tritiated water they found." I said, "Well, sure I would if you'll eat a banana." And she didn't know what I was talking about, but there is actually a stronger beta particles in the banana. That is, the banana, potassium in the banana has more energetic beta particles than the tritium does. Tritium has extremely weak beta particles. It's one of the least aggressive types of particles you can imagine. But when I have a blog, you know, when I began blogging about this, and then I thought, oh my gosh, all these people are going to read my blog and try and avoid potassium-containing foods, which would be really, really bad for them, because we need potassium in our body, and our bones have a significant amount of potassium, and actually our bones irradiate us with potassium. And I thought, okay, so I wrote a whole blog saying, no, don't stop eating potassium, it's good for
I
you.
think what we're hitting on too is just the understanding of science and really knowing what we're talking about. And it gets twisted because people get scared. But what we really have to go back to, what is good science?
Well, that's right. And I think what has happened, particularly here in Vermont, is people with a political agenda have exploited the lack of knowledge and people's fear of radiation. For instance, the tritium leaks at Vermont Yankee, to push their political agenda.
Thank you for watching. My name is Lynn Coram. This has been Town Square, and I've been joined by guests Meredith Angwin, Howard Schaffer, and Tony Vanello. And we hope to see you on our next show.